Уважаемый Сергей Викторович,
Dear Sergei Viktorovich, dear Mr. Frattini, dear participants of our today's panel, with this session we're opening a series this forum, this session devoted to the global politics and the agenda, how to protect international peace. Within the framework of this agenda, we're going to hold a series of events, and the current panel discussion is devoted to this topic, and we are pleased to welcome a number of politicians and this session will be followed by a number of various events, including quests and discussions and various other events that will become, I'm sure, memorable events for all the participants of this festival. I believe that yesterday the majority of the people present here participated in the opening ceremony. A very beautiful event and a very impressive event. The welcoming remarks of the President of the Russian Federation were voiced where he actually valued the role of the youth in resolving various national, international issues in the world very highly. And he called on the young people of the world to proactively participate in resolving the issues on the agenda of the world. I believe that the political processes, the participation in the political processes demonstrates the importance of public institutions, and I would like also to show this role of the young people, their role of full-fledged actors of the world politics. And the young people have a number of skills and which enable them to adapt very quickly and effectively achieve the objectives. We have seen a number of examples, of brilliant examples, of how the young people actually resolved very complex problems that are part of the agenda of the international community at the time. You know, these are the problems relating to health issues and a number of other areas of human life. And this is something that we can be proud of. The president at the opening ceremony actually was meeting with these people, and those people who managed to see the reports understood the level of commitment of these people and how much these people are ready to do together with their colleagues and friends. We are holding our first session today within the framework of this agenda, and I believe that we are very lucky to have with us here today the people who we know very well, and these are the people who are at the forefront of resolving various international issues. It's the Minister of Foreign Relations of the Russian Federation, Sergei Viktorovich Lavrov, and you know him very well. He doesn't need any introductions. Then the former Minister of Foreign Relations of Italy, and currently the Executive Director of the Institute of Eurasian Studies, Mr. Franco Frattini, and Leonid Drachevsky, a well-known ambassador, a political figure, and the leader of an international fund, Gorchakov Fund for the support of public diplomacy, and Anatoly Torkunov, the head of our alma mater, the man who is doing everything he can so that the university, the institute, was among the best institutions of the sort in the world. It is my great pleasure now to give the floor to Sergei Lavrov. think I will start with the introduction from this place, and then will take my seat at the table for the discussion. I would like to, first of all, welcome you at this World Youth and Students Festival. It was with a great interest that we actually accepted the idea of holding this discussion. Moreover, Russia has always been supportive of a straightforward and open dialogue on the most burning issues, relevant issues of the political agenda. And we need such a dialogue among the young people. Thousands of young people came to participate in this festival, and this is a great opportunity to know each other better, to agree on further contacts, on interests, and supporting the a mutual understanding between the nations. And I think it's a good opportunity to compensate what the politicians fail to do at the government's level. I believe that this will be a great opportunity for you to get new friends, and you will definitely have time to see the highlights of Sochi. Sochi is a city that has a well-established reputation now of an international center in tourism and education and a number of other areas of human activity. As to the situation in the world, it still remains very complex. We still have unresolved conflicts, frozen conflicts, and new challenges emerge. The new wave of international terrorism that actually menaces all the states without exception. We have to unite our efforts, but this unification of efforts has so far failed. The main reason for it is that some governments are actually trying to follow their own geopolitical interests in detriment to the interests of other states and peace. Methods of exporting state structures and imposing certain characteristics of the state, using the military force without resolutions of the United Nations, extraterritorial use of jurisdiction are undermining or already have undermined the authority of the international organizations. Libyan, Syrian scenarios, and some of the actors are trying to build up to their military might. The weapons of mass destruction and the loss of trust, which will be very difficult to restore. Unfortunately, it is all strengthened by the decision of the United States to withdraw from the deal with Iran and the growing tensions with the North Korean Republic. These efforts to build a one-polar, single-pole world have failed. Everybody understands that it's impossible to resolve global problems within this context. It is impossible to manage the international relations from one center only. The global landscape is changing. More and more countries are building their activities on fair and democratic basis. Countries are becoming more responsible for the stability in their regions, and the objective reality actually reflects the desire of the people to maintain their identity and to identify their own ways of development. However, this objective process is being opposed by a small group of Western countries who are trying to maintain their dominance. And it's a paradoxic picture that we are currently seeing. You know, these are the countries who are against pluralism in the world politics, and that's how they betray the values, democratic values. It's a good example. The United States were built on the principles of of democratic principles, and they are trying to turn this into its opposite, and they're ready to violate the principles. So the world may either go into chaos or turn to mutually supportive effort on the world arena in order to make the humankind to prosper. We do not plan to incur any losses for anyone. We will continue to support the truth, the fairness, and we will continue to respect the interests of other countries and try to achieve mutually acceptable compromises. We will continue with our agenda, the forward-looking agenda, and we will continue to play as a guarantor of international stability. We will definitely strengthen the international relations with all those countries that are ready for it, both using bilateral and multilateral mechanisms and fora. BRICS, SCO, Eurasian Economic Council are very good examples of such fora, and the decisions are taken into account all the interests of all the participating parties. Within the SCO BRICS, will continue to work sustainably, despite of the Russophobic sentiments currently very much spread in the West. We are ready to cooperate with the allies from NATO and other Western countries. For instance, G20 is a good example of a balance that I referred to earlier, where Western countries and emerging economies are represented equally. We also have to develop our relations with NGOs, both in Russia and outside of Russia, including the youth organizations. We believe there is a good basis to develop public diplomacy. We are always ready to listen to your evaluations, your ideas, and support your big plans. It is very soon that you will have to take responsibility for everything that is happening in your countries and on the international arena. And President Putin yesterday said you have to take these efforts in order to make the world more stable and a prosperous place to live and develop in. I believe that you will find new friends here, you'll make new friends, and I would wish you every success in your work at this festival. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Sergei Viktorovich. I would like to give the floor now to our friend, our foreign participant of this panel discussion. Mr. Karelin has just joined us. I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Franco Frattini.
Gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much for this very kind invitation. I'm very pleased and honored to be here today. Well, in 1945 in Yalta, global leaders sat together and tried to fix some common rules that together they call global orders rules. I think 72 years later, despite some progress made, the world of today, unfortunately, is more insecure. There are different changes, there are threats, there are those who want to destroy our culture, our civilization. So we have to do more. We have to do in a different way to face what I could call today global chaos, exactly the opposite of a global order. I think the West and European Union in particular runs the risk to lose its identity. I speak as European, I speak as Italian. I think fundamental rights are at stake. In particular, to me, Christian values of non-negotiable rights to life and human dignity are at stake. I think confusing the right integration, which is a key principle, with the open doors to those who, I think, want in the name of different cultures and religion destroy our civilization is absolutely wrong. We cannot allow those who want to enter into our countries, into my country as well, by bringing radicalism, by bringing submission of women, no right to education for girls, even female genital mutilations that are a catastrophe in the land of rights like European Union. So living together means respecting laws and individual rights of everyone. While, for instance, all the religions must be equally respected, we all should continue a tireless fight all together against radical Islamists. Those I can define blasphemic people that use God as an excuse for killing other people and want to win their war for power, and they will never win, in our common shared opinion, I hope. On the identity, which is in Europe probably is one of the main problems of today, in Russia, despite the plurality of your ethnicities, traditions, religions, from Kaliningrad to Vladivostok, some, as you say, are Ruski, but all are a feel Russian. And this is the feeling of a common destiny. I'm afraid, I don't know if we will ever be able to build even only the pillars of a common European identity, and sadly so. In this global chaos of today, we don't want the generation, I would say, of my daughter, your generation, running the risk to have a worse instead of a better living condition. It would be the first time in the history. My generation used to live in a better situation than my parents' generation. Now we run the risk to have a different situation. Despair, less of hopes. This is the worst perspective for young people. I think the role of United Nations, we frequently speak about that, is more important than ever. Please don't undermine the credibility of the system of United Nations. So global players, first of all, Russia and United States, have to cooperate on the most critical issues like terrorism, or I would say the broader Middle East and Northern Africa. And please say no to unilateral decisions. One day, the withdrawal from the Paris Agreement on protecting the environment, the other day, the desertification of the nuclear deal, which is quite a guarantee of stability. Please, you have to understand, our colleagues in Washington, that what is decided in Washington doesn't stay in Washington. It comes to my home. And this is my interest as well, to avoid such kind of unilateral decisions. What about Europe? Frankly speaking, having been also Vice President of European Union risks to be irrelevant. Sometimes it is silent, sometimes it is shy, and frankly speaking, the simple loyalty with the United States does not justify, for example, to bring NATO back to the Iron Curtain era instead of the era where there was the treaty in Italy where President Putin and President Bush shook hands and said, we want to overcome a containment policy, we want to have a cooperation policy. And now, again, we are back to the sanctions-based policy, which is damaging Europe. First, not only Russia, of course, is damaging Russia, is damaging politically and economically European Union and member states of Europe. So what to do? I think we have first to give Syria a future. Is a must. In a moment where we are fighting Daesh and Raqqa, the so-called capital city of ISIS, is falling down, what about the future? What about the future? Libya is another must. We have to solve the crisis, and thanks to the Russian Federation for the efforts to bring together General Haftar and Cyrenaic with Tripolitania to have a unity government, bringing together peace and reconciliation for Italy is a key priority, because Libya, we like or not, is a transit country from sub-Saharan and Saharan Africa, and we have to stop all kind of trafficking in human beings, trafficking in weapons, trafficking in drugs. So my final point is that we badly need, and I speak to you, the young, a new 21st century humanism. We have to focus on younger generation that can share some common basic values of dignity and non-negotiable individual rights. Culture and education is the key. It is the best investment there. And as Sergei just said, President Putin is right to focus and to invest in education and culture in this country. Fanaticism, radicalism is the worst enemy. So, dear young participant, centrality of each individual is essential. We want peace. We need leaders. We need leaders that are capable to reject any compromises where our key values are at stake. We all are obliged to protect basic values. Thank you very much.
Спасибо огромное, господин Фратини. Должен сказать...
Thank you very much, Mr. Frattini. I must say that the Festival of Youth and Students here in Sochi has designated as one of the key issues to discuss and debate here. Among them are education, cooperation, human dignity, social values, interaction. And what you said just now was so inspiring and so much to the point. We know that you are an experienced diplomat and a statesman, and we share your views, and it's gratifying to see that you share ours. Dear friends, yesterday during the opening ceremony and during President Putin's intervention, we've heard more than once that youth organizations and they're generally public organizations, as they are involved in solving the biggest problems of society and communities, is impossible without some public groups, groups based on common interests or some other issues that they center upon. I must say that in recent years, this country has seen many such groups start, and we can even speak about strong public movements of young people, including those that center on issues of global politics. The public and young people are involved not just in discussions, but in addressing, in actually tackling those important issues. One such organization is the foundation named after the Russian diplomat Gorchakov. This foundation is headed by Mr. Leonid Drachevsky, and I'm happy to be able to give the floor to him right now. Dear friends, our foreign minister and Mr. Frattini, the former minister of Italy, have started their presentations standing at this podium, so I'll have to do that too. I want to thank the first two speakers for the contributions they made. Mr. Frattini, for instance, is somebody who knows European politics, who has very immediate personal experience of European politics because he was the person responsible for the foreign policy of the European Union as the European Commissioner for International Relations. So what he said is very relevant and based on our deep knowledge. Now, I would like to talk to you about something different, about the role of civil society, which is something that you represent. And for a long time into the future, you will be involved in it in many different ways, whether you are part of some sort of public organizations or whether you are public figures in your own rights, the public figures of a new generation. In this sense, it's particularly important for you to understand, and for all of us to understand, where civil society stands in today's world and whether or not it has its voice heard in the world. And a big question arises here. And this question is that in today's world, we are done with the times of autocracy or theocracy that had been the biggest impediment to the development of the world today. Today's times are different, but if we can characterize it, we should say we live in a times of mediocrity, not mediocracy, but the power of the media, public media. And it's the media that determine shall we say, the weather in today's world, political climate, the moral climate. And I mean just a few players in the global mass media market, maybe 3 or 4 companies only. And they determine the information policy of the whole world. I want to quote a Serbian film director. He was speaking during an event called the Balkan Dialogue, and this is what he said. The Iron Curtain is no more, but there is the CNN curtain. This is so sad and so true. And this power of the media selects the lifestyle for everybody in the world, and anybody who is not in line with it is blacklisted. Such a person is considered non-shake-handable. And it's up to us to do something to oppose that, to talk to each other, to meet each other, to hear each other, and say what we want to say to each other. This is no easy task, let me tell you. For instance, I can say that in our foundation, we keep trying to talk to young people, or people in universities. But many universities close their doors on us because we seem to be saying not what they want to hear. But there is something that needs to be said today. Today's situation in the world is explosive. And the word war is heard all the time around us. War is being talked about. It's being talked about as a possibility. In fact, the war is on. It is a kind of war that we're living in. We're living in such times when statesmen, when politicians who would not ordinarily have been suspected of being aggressive, now talk war all the time. And everybody talks defense. No country has a ministry of aggression. Every country has a ministry of defense. And the rhetoric that they use, well, rhetoric is cheap. What you need to look at is the bottom of the matter. You have to ask yourself, why is it that Mrs. Mogherini, a peaceful person ordinarily, starts talking about the need for European armed forces to defend Europe against somebody? She talks about the need for defensive strategies for the European Union to defend European values. And it's not just Mrs. Mogherini only. I just used her as an example. The situation is dangerous. The situation is explosive. And we have to realize that sometimes we simply can't have our voice heard. It's impossible to talk to each other sometimes. So there are lots of issues, say, between Russia and the European countries. We can't have normal bilateral relations because the European Union operates in such a way that somebody determines what moves are quote-unquote political and thus have to be determined by full consensus of the European Union. So you can't have bilateral relations. You can only have relations with the Union as a whole. We want to know where the borderline between what's possible and what's impossible lies. We don't want our efforts thwarted because of that. And this is something that needs to be discussed within the framework of the civil society. And it's up to us, to people who set up public opinion and the international agenda that must have a say in that. We are living in the times of post-truth. This is something that is much spoken about today as well. We hear it from important public figures. And everybody seems to be reconciled to it. Fake news is something we hear around us every day. and it's very influential. It can determine how certain public situations and processes develop in the future. We've come to a stage, a terrible stage in international relations, where we have to think back to that person who was part of a Nazi regime, and he said, the more horrible a truth is, the more readily it will be believed by the public. Can we put up with that? Can we reconcile ourselves to that? No, we cannot. Because you have your lives to live in this world, and we cannot hand over the world to you if it is like that. That is why this needs to be changed. Thank you. Dear friends, you will know that athletics plays a great role in today's world. Remember, Olympic Games used to have the motto, "Oh, sports, your peace." But today, political interests are so important, even in the world of athletics, that no peace survives there either. But there are certain figures among our athletes who have such impeccable reputation that makes it possible for them to voice the principal issues of the day and to speak for the kind of sports that would be in support of peace. And one such person is Mr. Alexander Karelin, and I give the floor to him. He's the Olympic champion. Mr. President, dear friends, if you talk about my reputation, it would be a violation of my reputation to come late to a meeting where Mr. Lavrov is speaking. But the city of Sochi is a very special place, and sometimes you simply can't do things there as you would like them to be done. Yesterday, during the opening day of the festival, the athletic events gathered 9,300 people, and this means that athletics is not just a competitive thing. It is also a very attractive thing. I want you to hear what I say, not just because you are young and I'm a well-known athlete. No, sports is about rules, and rules are to be obeyed. When you come to a sports ground, you have to undertake to obey some very specific rules. So I hope that all of you who are gathered here in this city, which was the Olympic capital of Russia, will get to learn about many interesting things about our country and about other countries. To me, the festival is a wonderful opportunity to find more friends and more people to talk to. This is what we hear our foreign minister say repeatedly again and again. Those people who use double standards and who try to institute chaos in this world have to realize that this is no way to bring the world closer together. And I want to say to you this personal experience of meeting people from other countries, multiplied by the unifying force of the Russian language, will lead you to a personal and closer and better understanding of what the world really is. Don't always trust what you see on television. It's not always true. We had now to recall what the Minister of Propaganda of one very unpleasant state said, and that's a sad thing. But let me share this with you. Be greedy. Take all you can. The Russian state is more than 150 years old, and the new Russian state is over 20 years old. So we are both old and young. We are a country that is 25 years old, at least in one sense, so it's as old as you. Be here, learn from it, and this will make you not only competitive for tomorrow, this will not only make you the masters of the world, which is what us gray-haired or no-haired people say. This will make you independent. This will make you strong. This will make you critically thinking so that you can decide for yourselves and see with a clear vision. And you will then be able to be in charge of our planet.
Спасибо большое. Отвечая на призыв Александра Карелина, мы теперь можем перейти к вопросам и ответам. Поэтому, пожалуйста, аудитория, волонтеры, я надеюсь, будут микрофоны давать. Пожалуйста, вот молодой человек в третьем ряду, да.
Здравствуйте. Лавриченко Кирилл, второй курс, факультет международных отношений, МИЭП МГИМО. Скажите, пожалуйста, сейчас в Испании и, в частности, в Каталонии очень острая, действительно напряженная политическая обстановка. Вследствие чего хочу задать такой вопрос. Как Российская Федерация в дальнейшем планирует реагировать и оценивать данную обстановку? Спасибо.
Если вопрос мне, то я скажу следующее. Мы уже комментировали эту ситуацию.
If the question was asked of me, then, let me reiterate and say that it's an internal, a domestic issue of Spain. We hear the calls to participate in the dialogue, including in the dialogue with Barcelona. We believe that this is a path to contemplate and to analyze the situation that has established itself after the referendum. I think this dialogue will happen, taking into consideration the constitution of the country and the idea of a comfort and a comfortable life of Spaniards in good contact with each other. I don't see any other way out. Good morning, Maxim Sekach from Khabarovsk, the far eastern branch of the All Russia University. The first question goes to the foreign minister. I would like to ask you about the criminal code of the United Nations. As a coded source of legislation in comparison with the international court. I just would like to listen to what you have to comment on that. And what do you think about the international tribunals within the framework of peacekeeping courts of the United Nations that would be created as an alternative within peacekeeping contingents of forces based in various countries? There's a number of publications, and this is my idea. Well, in order to be able to comment on that, I probably should first know the details of the international criminal code, and these peacekeeping courts as well, because based purely on the terms that you have just voiced, it would be very difficult, next to impossible, to comment on the gist. However, if you are referring to these peacekeeping courts within the framework of the peacekeeping operations, something that you are proposing to establish in the future, on the first approach, I don't really think that this is a too good idea. Because peacekeepers have the function of peacekeeping, and I can't imagine a situation when, while peacekeeping, they will also judge people within a court. There have been examples of special courts, special tribunals established by the Security Council. not within the peacekeeping operations, but in order to establish the, there's the Tribunal for former Yugoslavia, which is still functional, although it should have been closed much earlier. There was a tribunal on Rwanda. 70 to 80% of the cases were brought against Serbs, within this tribunal for former Yugoslavia. Other cases that were brought up against representatives of other nationalities were broken down, before any decisions were reached. Ramush Kardinal, for instance, this man is still the prime minister of Kosovo, but he was a war criminal, and he was accused of war crimes, but he was released because of the lack of evidence, because all the witnesses either magically disappeared or rejected to provide any evidence. But if you send your publications or your ideas to the foreign minister of the Russian Federation, it is with great pleasure that we will look into them and respond. We have the leader, Konstantin Kolpakov, the leader of the Council of Young Diplomats, present here, so he will probably be your best contact. And they have a running project, and the unified, codified criminal law instead of the Roman legal system. I do understand that there is the Anglo-Saxon law, there's a Roman law, but in order to respond to the question what I think about the new far-fetched initiative, I have to look into the details, not only, to know the name of this new initiative. Hamira Gulnara from Bashkortostan. I have three questions to Mr. Lavrov. The first one is, what is the role and the place of Russia in the future of the world, say 10 years from now? Secondly, what is the role of the young people in this future Russia? And the third question is, as of today, what should be done and shouldn't be done by the young people in order to be living in this future prosperous Russia 10 years from now? Well, it's a question that is worth writing a whole novel. That's a philosophical question. I believe that Russia's role in 10 years from now will be very important, and this trend towards multipolarity, which is an objective trend, when on all the continents we see the emergence of very powerful states being established, when these, this economic might brings together with it the political power as well. This will definitely transpire within 10 years more and more vividly, and those people who are trying to stop these trends will be more wise, will become wiser, and they will help this trend to develop. And definitely one of the new centers of this new world will be Russia, and Russia will continue to unite its neighbors within the framework of including the Eurasian project as well that was proposed by Mr. Putin. Within the framework of this Eurasian integration process and the Chinese initiative, One Belt, One Road, involving the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, ASEAN participants, and besides, we are all living on one continent. Why don't we, spread all these ideas on the European Union as well, who is increasingly understanding that the European Union is going to lose its influence in the world politics and economics. And Jean-Claude Juncker recently mentioned that, speaking at one of the high-profile events, said exactly that. As far as the role of young people is concerned, within 10 years from now, I believe, well, you will be 10 years older. at that time, and the social lifts that we currently have and that are in the process of being created will help you to show your talents and gifts. But if you will definitely follow your successful life cycle, and you will become very successful people, I'm sure, in 10 years from now. Thank you. Gidar Zemdinov from Bashkortostan. Good morning, dear colleagues. It is no secret that you, Mr. Karelin, you are a model for all of us. You know, this is a 3 times Olympic champion, the hero of the Russian Federation. Here we go with your question. And the deputy of the State Duma. What is easier, you know, to participate in a wrestling match or to participate in the political fight, so to speak? And what was your advice to the young generation in order to be as successful as you are? It actually confirms what I said. Whenever nuclear war happens, there will be only 2 forms of life living on this planet. You know, those wrestlers and cockroaches. Even here, you know, we have some wrestlers, and wrestlers are very well represented here and at this event. You know, I use certain. We all use certain tricks, certain methods in our wrestling. I would say that there are 2 conditions that are very important. It's the expectation or anticipation. Expectation is probably a better word. You know, the people are expecting from you something when they are supporting you. You know, in the wrestling match, that's one thing, and then in the political arena, again, you have your supporters, and they have their expectations, and you know, you have to work very hard. You have to do your best. When we speak about motivation, it seems to be a complex notion. Greed sometimes is a motive, but if you actually quoted Ivan Organ, I don't know, just pay more for your training sessions and you'll get invited to that night show. There's one more thing that I would like to mention. At this table here, we have the people gathered who are not afraid of taking very difficult decisions. And every one of you should understand that if you are capable of taking up this load, you are capable of achieve a lot. Within 10 years from now, I'm sure some of you will be sitting at this table here. Therefore, be straightforward, put forward your positions, support your positions. Everything is so very simple. Respect, the respect for the older people, which starts with simple words as good morning, good afternoon, and thank you. Anna Rabey from the Republic of Crimea, and the young legislators Association. The issue of Catalonia was raised here. It is a very important issue for our region, and we were discussing, you know, with our colleagues which session I would choose, and I said I would like to participate in the session with Mr. Lavrov. And one guy from Lebanon said, Sergei Lavrov, tomorrow, here? It is a great honor and pleasure for me to be sitting here in this audience, and I would like to say how proud we all are for the efforts undertaken by the Minister of Foreign Relations of the Russian Federation here in Russia and in the world arena. I would like to ask a question about the young human resources. I would like to ask whether you welcome young people in your ministry, and who the youngest specialist in your ministry as of today, for instance. Could you say who is the youngest specialist? We definitely welcome all the young people in our ministry. We will not be able to survive without young people, the young blood, on an annual basis. We hire about 100 young specialists. As of this year, for instance, we hired 115 people. These are graduates of the Moscow Institute of International Relations, the St. Petersburg University, the Linguistic University, and the majority of our young specialists hired by the ministry was girls. So we have our own methods, you know. We also apply diplomatic methods or techniques. We have 45% of these young specialists hired in this year. 45 are girls. I don't know actually who the youngest specialist is, the youngest diplomat, but I would like to reiterate and say that over the past 10 years, very many have managed to move along the career line, you know, and they keep receiving new ranks, new higher ranks, and are very successful. So please come and join us. I would like to add, for the representative of the Republic of Crimea, the students who are now studying at our university. You know, we have 57 people from Crimea, and we wish them every success. It's the girl with the flag, please.
Alexandra Samatova.
Good morning, I'm Alexandra Samatova. I represent the delegation of Germany. I wanted to thank you all for this warm welcome here in Sochi. And I have a question about Germany. German business is opposed to extending sanctions against Russia because Russia is one of the major partners for Germany, an importer of equipment. When I was at university, I did an internship in Nuremberg where food industry equipment was produced that used to be purchased by Russia, and now that it cannot be, the factory had to close down. So I have a question for Mr. Lavrov. What can we, young people in Germany, do to help normalize trade relations between Russia and Germany? Because we would like to cooperate. We would like to be friends and to cooperate with the young people of Russia. Well, you know, Russia is often blamed for interfering with elections in the United States, in Germany, and elsewhere. Would you like us to interfere with the German economy? I'm joking, of course. But of course it is absurd what is happening between our countries. Certainly sanctions are a double-edged sword that strike against the economies of both sides. If you act against the rules of open markets, against the rules of the World Trade Organization, then what can you expect? Certainly, if such sanctions are adopted, the other side can strike back, whether this response is symmetrical or asymmetrical. We used to have a trade turnover with the European Union of 400 million euros a year. Now it has dropped to half as much only. And this is primarily the result of the sanctions that were adopted by European countries against Russia and Russian counter-sanctions against the European countries. And we hear voices from important political figures who say that this is absurd, this can't go on like this. We hear such voices from Italy, France, and Germany, and some other countries as well. And we hope that reason will triumph eventually. Franco was going to say something?
Yes, of course. Just to know that Italy alone loses on the average some 3 billion euros per year only because of sanctions policy with the Russian Federation. So not only in Germany, also in Italy and many other European member states, business communities are pushing for lifting this stupid policy based on sanction. The problem, unfortunately, is the problem of political leaders. If political leaders, I have to say the government in my country has been always against the sanction, but unfortunately, due to the machinery of European Union, we could not oppose alone. Now, as far as I know, other member states are joining the position of Italy, Greece, Spain, maybe Germany. I don't know if the new government of Germany, where the Liberals and the Greens will be together with Chancellor Merkel party, will be able to decide strongly for a new policy. And particularly the problem is that if political leaders are simply following in Europe what Washington urges to do, that's the political irrelevance of Europe at all.
I have to pick up from here. Franco said that the mechanisms of the European Union make it impossible for Italy alone to prevent the decision for anti-Russian sanctions. Franco is my good friend, and I hope he doesn't take it as an offense. But I've heard the same from 5 or 6 foreign ministers of different countries. Why didn't they come together? Why didn't they join their forces and say in one big voice, we are against this consensus in the European Union? This could have made a difference. And this is not my complaint against any individual European country. But you see, when our friends in the European Union, and we have plenty of friends in the European Union, tell us, oh, we're really sorry, but you see, we have this principle of solidarity, and we have to always look for a compromise and to find a middle way between extreme points of view. Well, I suppose there will have been some countries in the European Union who did not at all want to punish Russia for what happened in the Crimea, which was a decision of the Supreme Council of the Crimea that was elected fully in line with Ukrainian laws and was totally legitimate in that situation. On the other hand, I am aware that there are Russophobic countries in Europe, a minority, but a loud minority, and they wanted Russia to be punished by all means. So the European Union had to express its solidarity by having all 28 to vote with the aggressive minority. Today, we see new parties win elections in European countries, and I hope that soon a more balanced approach will triumph, and Europe will see that it needs to act independently and not just follow what is dictated from the other side of the ocean, which is sometimes quite contradictory in itself, that Europe has to think for itself and act in its own interests. Mr. Lavrov, I'm Tatiana Romanishina of Serpukhov, Moscow region. I have a simple question, not a very global one, although this is a global panel, global policy panel. We hear a lot about the need to preserve national identities, and we also need to be friends. In Soviet times, there was this policy of sister cities between Russia and other countries. My question is, does this system still exist today? Can we, young people, do something to organize this sister city relationship between our towns and towns elsewhere? Oh, certainly the answer is yes. The sister cities movement is alive and well and developing. We know that many Russian cities and towns have sister cities and towns in Italy. And more towns in other countries want to have this sisterhood relationship with towns in the Crimea. This process is actually going strong. So if you, in the Moscow region, as you say, are interested to learn more about the possibilities of finding such a town or a city for your own town, you simply have to ask your business people, those who do business in your town, whether they have partners in some specific place, and act from there. And then you can start such a relationship between universities. I think it's a very good idea. Thank you very much. I'm Ajan Alisherova from Kyrgyzstan. I have a question for Mr. Lavrov. You mentioned several times a number of regional organizations, such as the Eurasian Economic Union. This sounds as something very important for me because Kyrgyzstan is a member of that organization. What do you see in the future for this organization? Do you see it as a common market without barriers, or do you see it expanding and including more states? Well, both, I suppose. One doesn't preclude the other. The Eurasian Economic Union plans both to integrate more closely, remove all the barriers to the free movement of goods, capital, and labor. On the other hand, there is a very practical discussion about adding new members, first as observers, and then as full members. And recently there was a meeting of heads of states of the countries involved, and they adopted a new statute on observer states for those who are willing to join. Good afternoon. I'm Ali Vakil from Yemen. I'm from Yemen. I'm a graduate student of the Russian Institute of the People's Friendship. I have a question for Mr. Lavrov. The Arab Revolution of 2012, has it been instrumental in improving relations between Russia and Arab countries, or the opposite? Let me say it again. The Arab Revolution of 2012, has it improved Russia's relations with Arab countries or not? Well, when the so-called Arab Spring started and everybody in the West was so inspired by seeing the people rising against dictatorships for freedom, this was a time of euphoria. And some politicians in the West and some politicians in the region said that the Russian Federation was standing on the side of quote-unquote authoritarian regimes in the region, and that Russia is going to lose its allies and friends in the region. But soon, quite soon, it became obvious that Arab Spring was a very destructive process. It instituted chaos in the region. Some authoritarian leaders, such as Saddam Hussein, although this came a bit earlier, but this was a lesson not learned. I'm talking about leaders such as Gaddafi and others. So after what happened to them, we saw Libya and Iraq sink into chaos. And the same is happening in Syria right now, or attempts to do the same. So Russia did not panic over the events that we could have no influence upon at the time. And these events were in fact instigated from the outside. Public opinion was worked up from the outside. We were in contact with all the parties to the conflict, to those political developments, in Libya, in Yemen, and in other countries. Russia was the only country that kept contacts with all the sides of the processes. Franco mentioned Libya in his speech. We talked to people in Tobruk, in Benghazi, and in Tripoli. So the example of Syria perhaps is the most graphic one. We see heads or representatives of all the opposition movements come and talk to Russian politicians. And our military have reached agreement with people on the ground to institute those zones of de-escalation or deconflicting, so that humanitarian aid can be transported to people who desperately need it. This just goes to show that we can work with all the forces on the ground. And those who criticized Russia for losing its influence in the region have fallen silent. At least that's what I hear from our partners today. I want to greet you. I'm Zagran Magomedova. I represent Dagestan in the regional parliament. We live in the area of the Caspian Sea, and we're very much concerned about the environment there. The countries around the Caspian Sea are Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Russia, and Iran. If we are to protect the environment of that sea, we need to act together. Can we expect some agreements between all these countries to protect the Caspian Sea? Or is anything like that going to happen soon? Yes, certainly. There is already in place the Convention for the Protection of the Environment of the Caspian Sea. A convention about the protection of bioresources is in the pipeline, although it has taken rather more time than we expected. It was launched in 2010 in the Baku summit. The president of one of the countries, the president of Turkmenistan, come to think of it, proposed this convention at that time. He spoke about a moratorium on fishing of sturgeon, and everybody seemed to be in favor of that. But there are some glitches in the process. Let's not go into details right now. Anyway, the intention is now to adopt a convention for the protection of biological resources of the Caspian Sea. This is taking a lot of time, but everybody recognizes the need to protect that fragile environment. And this is also behind the Russian idea of laying trans-Caspian oil pipelines. As different from the Black Sea, the Caspian is much more fragile and much more threatened, and we have to be much more careful with such projects. And this is Russia's position. Hello, I'm Amal Zaki. I am from the delegation of Egypt. I have a question for Sergei Lavrov. What is your view of Russian-Egyptian relations? What, in your view, is going to be the future of those relations? Especially as far as economic and political relations are concerned. Oh, we're very optimistic about Russian relations with the Arab Republic of Egypt. We are in close political dialogue. We have high-level contacts, contacts between foreign ministers, economic ministers, transportation ministers, or in fact, all line ministers are in contact with their Egyptian counterparts. We are now starting a number of important projects, including a Russian industrial zone in Egypt that will be a strong foundation for joint projects in many different industries, and it will be also an important contribution to the Egyptian economy with more jobs. Our trade volume is increasing. Egypt is a big purchaser of Russian grain, and this is important for the Egyptian government to fulfill its social obligations. We have good cooperation on regional interaction. Egypt has been our partner in instituting de-escalation zones in Syria, in East Homs and Ghouta. And we are grateful to our Egyptian partners for that. We also work together on Libya, together with Algeria and Tunis, trying to reinstitute the national dialogue in Libya. In the United Nations organization, where Egypt is now one of the members of the Security Council, we are acting together. Recently, Egypt proposed the complex framework for counteracting terrorist activities, and Russia supported that. These examples can be multiplied. I just quoted the ones that came to my mind right now.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Арсений.
Good morning, my name is Arseny, and I'm from the Czech Republic. The question is as follows. Every year in the Czech Republic, we have reminders, so to speak, on all the squares of the Czech Republic of the time when the Russian tanks were brought into Czechoslovakia. This is an issue that actually impacts greatly the relations between the Russian-speaking population and the Czech-speaking population. Is there anything planned to do that? And we hear on the news quite often that Russia actually does not require the debts to be paid by many countries. Well, dating back to remembering the times, I do not remember actually an instance when somebody of our Czech colleagues, like at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, have ever touched upon this topic I think it's a turned page in the talks, in the negotiations with the Russian colleagues. And I believe that we have turned this page, and we do not have any obstacles on our way of successful cooperation with the Czech Republic. Of course, historians should definitely take a note of this date and should continue the discussion of the reasons that led to such an incident and what should be done, and think about what should be done in order to avoid such incidents in the future. So historians should deal with these issues. As far as the debts are concerned, debt forgiven, so to speak, we have different relations with different countries, and as far as I remember, we have not forgiven any debts to the Czech Republic. I would like to add the presidents of the two countries actually instructed us to establish a special forum that will be discussing various issues, including historic events, historic incidents. Therefore, such a cooperation is planned between historians of the two countries. I would like to give an opportunity to different areas of this audience, to be able to ask the questions they're interested in. Good morning. I would like to welcome first Alexander Karelin. Mr. Karelin, thank you very much. I represent North Ossetia. You have done a lot of sports, and you know our athletes as well. But I have a question to Mr. Sergei Lavrov. Mr. Lavrov, people know of the suffering of the Ossetian people, We all remember the Beslan events. Do you think that unification of the South Ossetia and the North Ossetia is possible within the framework of the Russian state, of the Russian Federation? As you are aware, we had such a situation, back in the Soviet Union times, when by the decision based on political will only, Ossetia was divided into two parts, and then the same thing happened to the Crimea. Then the South Ossetia is recognized by the Russian Federation as an independent state, and the Russian peacekeepers actually helped to avoid the forceful solution of the so-called territorial dispute, as this problem was referred to by the former president of Georgia, Saakashvili. There was an aggressive action undertaken by the Georgian government. We will continue to respect the sovereignty of the South Ossetia, and we will continue to improve our relations through our relations based on alliance and friendship. Thank you.